Yo, guys, welcome back to another episode of Into the Mind. I'm excited. We're going to sit down with Ryan Schrope. We just finished the episode, and we talked about everything from his time living in a van to him having a W-2 job, leaving it, getting into real estate, starting a lending business, and building a community on Skool, where he was recently the champion of the Skool Games. We get into some of the challenges he faced while making this decision to go full-time investing and betting on himself, and how it's now working out where they're doing $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 months consistently, and now he's going from just doing deals to building a business. So hang out, watch the entire episode, leave a comment below if you get value from this episode, and I'll see you on the backside. Ryan, what's going on, bro? Thanks for coming on to the podcast. I appreciate you coming here early this morning, getting the workout in, getting the code plunge in. I'm excited about jumping into this conversation because you and I, we were talking about this downstairs in the kitchen. We've known each other for about a year and a half now. And since knowing each other, I've watched you on this journey between real estate investing, getting into lending, now building out a community on the Skool platform, which you were just recently a champion of the Skool Games. Yep. Shout out to Skool and Alex Hormozy. You're even rocking the hat today, which is something that you mentioned to me. You can't buy this hat. The only way to get it is to earn it. So I love it that you're rocking it like
best kind of stuff, right?
It's the best. And so I've been watching you over this last year. They'll just work your absolute guts out. So what I want to do today is I want to jump into your story. I want to go back to your origin stories because you came from a traditional W-2. And I want to talk about how you've made that transition into entrepreneurship, the sort of mindset shifts that you've had in order to be able to get to the place where you are today, which is you're earning. And I'm not going to talk about all your finances, but you're doing well. You're doing $40,000, $50,000 months consistently now. And I want to talk about what that transitions look like. So take me back to the beginning, and not like your childhood, but take me back to the beginning of you coming from a W-2 kind of workspace and what made you want to start to get out of that.
Yeah, I'll back it up even a little bit before the W-2 because I was, I'm engineer by trade out of college. So I did like all the different corporate internships, right? And did the like, gosh, it was boring. The internships were like just a bunch of old people that sit in cubicles, that style thing. So I actually didn't get a W-2 out of college, which is, 90 whatever % of people would do. We actually lived in a Sprinter van instead. So
I remember that. I remember showing me some photos.
Yeah, so we moved into a van. That was during COVID, so it kind of worked out perfectly. It was like there weren't really any jobs anyways. We moved into a van, basically just lived out of a van, whitewater raft guide in the summer, ski instructor in the winter, just kind of lived the dream a little bit. So that's the precursor to the W-2, which I think does have a pretty big effect on leaving the W-2 because if people go high school, college, W-2, then I think it's a bigger jump than what I did because I went high school, college, live in a van first, right? So like it was already weird what I was, doing. It was off the beaten path. But question was leaving the W-2?
Yeah, well, because essentially, and it's cool to know that before the W-2, I didn't realize that came before the W-2. I thought that came after, that you did the van life because to that point, you experienced more freedom than most people will, in the States at least, will ever experience in their lifetime, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, unlimited freedom basically is what we had. The van broke down a lot, so slightly less freedom. But yeah, I mean, we could do whatever we wanted. And it was interesting because we did it and then we tried out going to the W-2. So I think one of the different mindset things for me was that I wasn't going into the W-2 thinking like, oh, I'm giving up living in a van and I'm just going to go have a job for the rest of my life. It was more like we tried the van and then I was trying the W-2, if that makes sense. So like it wasn't a full...
It wasn't a full
My heart
send.
was never fully in it.
Yep.
I just don't think that way. Like I feel like people, it's the same thing with moving, right? So we've moved more than most people in the past couple of years. And it's because when I move somewhere, I don't think like, oh, I'm going to like raise my family here and live here for 50 years or whatever. I moved somewhere and I tried out. That's really how I do it. So same mentality going into the W-2 was like, haven't had a W-2 before. I like engineering. I'm going to try this W-2. I'm going to try and find something that fits my personality a little bit, but it's not, I didn't go into it thinking like, if I hate this job the rest of my life, I'm going to be stuck here. It was like, let's just see what happens.
So you tried out, you put it on, and how did that fit? How did W-2 life fit for you? What did you notice about it? What did you like about it? And what did you hate about it?
I loved it. It was awesome.
Really?
It was, I'm very routine. As we talked about. So the routine was dialed in. I mean, I had it dialed in. So the big kicker for my job was it was an hour away from my house. So every day it was gym, hour drive to work, hour drive home. So obviously, 8-hour days, which are really 9 or 10-hour days, turn into more like 12-hour days. So a long time away from home, but I'm pretty nerdy. So I liked doing the engineering stuff. It was cool. The stuff we worked on was helpful to people. I did like off-grid electronics for the military. So it was like directly impacting people. So it was really cool. I got to be super creative, which is awesome. I think a lot of people, when they burn out, it's because they don't get to be creative. But I did. I got to be super creative. I was enjoying it. The people I worked with were awesome. So when I got there, I was very much working on a track of like, I want to move up the ladder and stay here. Like, this is awesome. And real estate was just a side gig because backstory again, I'm obsessed with finances in general. I was, maybe not always have been, but like, I was buying stocks when I was 15 or 16, like watching the stock market, that kind of stuff. So I was always pretty into it.
Yeah.
I was saving money in an envelope when I was a little kid, like that kind of like, I always was aware of finance. And so real estate wasn't originally like I'm going to be a real estate person or something. It was just like, it was the next step, the next logical step. So I was just juggling the two between the W-2 and real estate. The shift was that all the things I just said I liked about my job changed. So my boss left. That was incredible. Stepped down. New boss came in. They were not good. Other people left. The things I was doing changed. And so it went from everything I was doing was a perfect fit to everything I was doing I hated really quickly. And to add insult to injury, driving an hour to and from, so 2 to 2.5 hours every day, is not the end of the world when you enjoy where you're going.
Right.
But it very quickly becomes the end of the world when you hate where you're going.
That's so interesting.
Rapid change.
Yeah. So, I mean, for you, it really wasn't the actual work itself. It was more so the culture had changed with new management, essentially.
It was a combination of a lot of things. The culture was what forced me out. I was not expecting to leave that quickly, for sure. But the cool thing about it was that I was creating opportunities in the background, not for any particular reason, but just because, again, I enjoyed the finance side of things. I wanted to learn. I'd rather not get dumber. So I was just learning stuff, trying stuff out, and it happened to be there when I needed it.
So let me ask you this, because you're someone, you do have an engineer's mind, and you and I, when we do talk, we project into the future. We start to plan things out and see how far out we can think, how far out we could prepare for. When you were there in that job, what was your trajectory? Like, what did you think your trajectory was before the switch happened? Was it like, hey, all right, this job's kind of a good fit. We'll be here for the next couple of years, and then we'll build out this thing on the side? Like, was that the game plan, and then a wrench got thrown in it? Or like, what were you thinking when you got in there?
Yeah, that was definitely the game plan. I had worked at 3 different companies doing internships, and I hated them all. People were like, are you working to find the place that you love? And I'm like, no, I'm just finding the places I hate. That was pretty much how the internships were. My job was not that. Like, it was the perfect fit, which is why I took it. So my projection when I got there, it took a couple months, but I loved what I was doing. I absolutely loved the people I worked with. I knew for a fact that none of the other places I'd ever been were anywhere near as good as this place. So my projection was that I was going to just become a leader in the company. And it was a small company too. So it was one of those things where it's like, I could kind of pave my own path.
Yeah.
So I very much saw myself continuing. The only kind of in the back of my mind, it was like, how do we handle the fact that I'm driving an hour every day? I sold my car and bought a Prius. That was my solution. Got like 55 miles a gallon or whatever. And that was my game plan. But yeah, no, I fully expected to be there for a while. Like, no question about it.
Cool. So management switches, and you're now in a place where it goes from, hey, I'm driving to a place I love, to I'm driving to a place I hate. Was it a clear, all right, time to quit and go all in on me? And then how did that transition happen? Like, was it a very easy transition to say, let me step away from this because I'm no longer enjoying it? Or was it that pull of the golden handcuffs as well, where, hey, this job is taking care of us and giving me opportunity to build the side hustle?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
It definitely wasn't immediate. It was something that was very gradual. So timeline wise, the shift happened in January. I remember it very well. And I wasn't at the time thinking like, oh, I need to get out of here. It was more like, how do I make this suck less? And then it just kind of, honestly a combination of things. So my wife has scalable income, and her income started scaling. So she started making more money, which made me think about it a little bit. I started hating the drive, which made me think about it a little bit. And I started finding more opportunity in the real estate world, which made me think more about it. So it was like a lot of different things were moving around. But yeah, I even then I didn't really expect to leave. I just knew, I think I doubled down on the other things to try and see if I could get something to stick. Because the interesting thing is, if I was alone, I probably would have quit quicker. But because I'm married and had a house and stuff, it's like I'm not just making decisions for me, right? So it's a different mentality there of like, I can't just leave my job necessarily and go for it. So that was the thought process behind it, was like, I don't know for sure. And quitting didn't really come to mind. Again, it was more like that was a result of community, of other people around me. And the final push of quitting my job was visiting Phoenix. So
Really?
I kind of took that's like probably one of my superhero stories or something, was
Is this the visit when we met? Was this the wholesale hotline visit? And that's after that was when like the nail went into the coffin?
Yeah. So I came out here in May of 2023. I got a couple days off from work. There was an event here with our community that I knew was happening that was going to coincide with the dates I took off from work. And so I just bought a ticket out here. Didn't know a single person at all. Didn't rent a place to stay. I got a car, and I was going to just sleep in the car, which for some people sounds aggressive, but keep in mind, I did live in a van, so it's not really a huge leap for me. So I literally posted on Facebook, and I was like, hey guys, I just rented a car. I've got nowhere to stay. I'm going to be there for a week. If anybody wants to like just meet up and work with me, like, let's do it. I had no plans, and I really did not know a single human being out here. So I was just totally going for it. But when I got out here, things just happened, right? So there's just stuff happening here. So there was events. I met somebody named Gage Garber, who he had moved here 2 days prior. So he was in the same boat as me. So we clicked really quick. He had nowhere to, he had just rented an apartment, and it was unfurnished.
Yep.
And I had seen him on Kevin's social media, and I sent him a message, and I was like, hey, it looks like you have no idea what you're doing either. Do you want to like have no idea what we're doing together, basically? And he's like, dude, you can come over and stay at my house. It's empty, but we can just like sleep on the floor. And
I remember going and like,
and I was like, sick.
That
That's perfect, because I don't have anywhere to stay anyway. So I ended up meeting him, and when you meet one person that's connected, you then get connected to other people. So went to church with him, met some other people through that, ended up staying a couple extra days. And in that experience, I met friends that are still my friends today. Learned a lot, but I also had a bunch of people tell me I should quit my job, which was funny because to this point, I had still not made $1 in real estate. I just knew that I could. It's like the potential was there. So that was the push. Everyone was like, I think everybody that I met heard me complaining and was like, you should quit your job, which is interesting because I don't necessarily think that's the right thing to do for everybody.
Isn't it funny?
But the note here on when I did quit my job. So when I quit my job, I still had not made $1 in real estate when I quit, which is, again, I do not recommend that. But here's the interesting thing. So we had half of our house rented out that paid the mortgage. So the house was house hacked, so to speak. My wife had scaled her income, and it more than covered our living expenses. So I had the ability to take a leap that most people don't. And I'm super blessed to be even able to say that. But our expenses were covered. So I'm a pretty risky dude, but it's not as risky as it sounds when I say I left my job when I wasn't making any money, because it was like, okay, I know that the job I'm in, I don't want to be at. I know that I have a lot of potential to make money in other ways, and I've learned a lot. And the proof is in the pudding, because I know a bunch of people that are making plenty of money doing other things. So let me just chase down this path and see what's going on. And that was basically our agreement, was like, hey, are we going to be cool if I don't make money for a couple months and just kind of figure this stuff out? And Haley, being the most supportive person ever, was like, yeah, I'll just work harder and make more money.
And so I love that. And I want to emphasize this, because you said very clearly to the camera, do not quit your job.
Yeah.
And you're saying that because you as a team, you and Haley, you and your wife as a team, were earning active income enough that gave you time to explore, to try to build the next thing, to basically get the next horse saddled up and ready to ride.
Yeah. I mean, anybody that tries to make money on a deadline for whatever reason, whether they have to pay their rent, pay bills, whatever, it can be a good motivator. Don't get me wrong. But for the most part, when I see people do that, it just becomes a desperation play and you end up getting yourself in more trouble. So
Agreed.
I had the ability to go attempt to make money in whatever way I saw fit without the downside of if I don't make money, XYZ, right? It was fine. So worst case scenario, we were good. And that was the reason why I was able to do something that, again, I don't recommend to most people, is because I was in a situation I don't think most people are in.
Yeah. So now take me to this. You've quit your job. You've spoken to your wife, which, by the way, fellas, you wanted to speak to your wife before you decide to quit your job. It's very important. And so from there, you say, I'm going to go all in on this side hustle. And at that time, it was wholesale. When I met you, it was wholesale real estate was the direction you were headed in. It's not necessarily what you're doing now. In fact, you on your social media will speak out about it, that you don't do that actively anymore. Not that it's a strategy that doesn't work. It's just not the one that you chose. Talk to me about that transition when you were in the beginning of it, what you were finding. How was it going into a position of now building everything from scratch? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer in copying what other people are doing that works. And so for me, there were so many things in real estate that you could do and investing in general. And I was looking for somebody I could relate to, that I could copy, that I could feel like I was on the same vibe with. And that was Kevin Show. So Kevin started doing his wholesale thing. I saw it and I was like, he's the same age as me. He's actually younger than me. He's doing this thing. He's showing me exactly how he's doing it. I'm a very okay, if he's doing it, I can do the same thing. Right. So I started that. I think that was in maybe April. So that was, a couple months before I'd quit my job. So I had already started the momentum, right? I'd started making phone calls, starting messing stuff up, learning what I was doing wrong, learning what I could do better, and building up that momentum. So again, I hadn't made any money when I quit my job, but I actually got my first wholesale deal under contract the week after I quit my job. So it was right there.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing about that is I remember very distinctly, I quit my job on a Thursday, and my first thought was how am I going to fill an entire day with other work? Because up to this point, I had been gone, 12, 13 hours a day. It's a lot of time to be gone. But I got that wholesale deal basically right away. So I immediately, it was flipped a switch, and I was I'll never forget that Friday. I woke up and I had so much to do right after I quit my job, which was cool because there was no in between. So yeah, I just got into it because it was what was working. I knew it could make money. I saw other people doing it. I don't think, even from the start, I didn't think oh, this is going to be my dream scenario, but it was I just need to get my foot in the door. And one of the big things that sucks people into wholesale, which again, I'm not saying it's the worst thing in the world, but it's that everybody does it, right? And so you're actually more socially accepted, I think, in our circles if you wholesale, because you benefit more people. There's more people that you can collaborate with. It's just the normal thing to do.
Absolutely.
Right? So.
Yeah, and I do see a lot of people kind of flock to it because it's a simple strategy. Simple sometimes gets confused with easy, and people think it's very easy to do because they can understand the concept very simply. It's rare that someone, quits their job and gets a deal signed in the next week.
Yeah.
But as you jumped into it, I remember you were working with a partner that was out here in Arizona, Houston.
We met on the superhero trip in May. Same thing.
Get out of here.
So many things came from that trip.
I freaking love that. Yep. And so I remember it as you guys were building out your business too, it started to get to a point where there was a lot of fires, right? And wholesaling, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, who doesn't wholesale, it is a business of problems, right? We are actively seeking out problems in the marketplace. We're seeking out homeowners who have issues, who are in distressed situations, who have distressed properties, who have liens, and all the craziest headaches and stories in the world are what we actively go for because that's where the opportunity is. And so you guys had gotten yourselves built up a pipeline of a lot of problems to deal with. Is that what started to make the transition of you moving out of wholesale? Because I know you no longer focus on wholesaling. What caused you to step out of wholesale?
Yeah, that was one of the things. So there's a lot I could talk about here. So first of all, I wasn't just doing wholesale. Reason being, I started talking to Kevin and learning more from Kevin, and Kevin wasn't just doing wholesale, he was also lending. So I said, cool, if Kevin can do wholesale and lend, then I'll do wholesaling and lending. So I had already started kind of trying this other thing with lending. Have you ever seen the curve where it's like uninformed optimism? I can never remember what it's called. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It's like uninformed optimism, and then you realize it's not as easy as you thought it would be. And then it's informed pessimism, I think, and then you start to go down, and then you end in the valley of despair. And then you have to decide, are you going to suck it up and go back up into informed optimism, where it's like, I can do this, but it's harder than I think, or you switch to a new thing, right? So I went through that valley of despair multiple times, but the first time is always the hardest because it's like everybody's making $1 million wholesaling and it's not even that hard, right? That's like the let's go do this thing. And then I went through okay, there's a lot of problems. Some of them I'm not comfortable dealing with like at all. So it was stuff that I was like, okay, I immediately was like, I don't think I want to do this, forever. But I was also doing it well. So we were making good money. So that's always an interesting decision point. It's like, if you're making good money and you want to make money, what do you do? Right. So that was a hard one. I mean, that was a really hard one. And I mean, we leaned into it. I did it for probably a good 6 months. We're actually right at about 6 months, and we did it well. I mean, we made significantly good money. Some months really, really good money. Helped a lot of other people. And like I said, got put on more of a pedestal. Everybody's like, oh, they're doing well. Teach us and let's collaborate and whatever. So I didn't know what my path out is. Another really hard part is when you have a partner, it's harder to have a path out, right? Because you and your partner are rarely ever in the same exact spot. And so it's like, okay, we have different needs, but we're coming together to build this thing. We had, I guess you wouldn't call them employees, but we had people that worked for us, with us, that we paid. Yeah. So all that stuff is very hard to get out of.
I mean, you got people relying on you to go out and produce. And I remember it might have been a year ago that you guys came out to Arizona and had a little mastermind. And I was supposed to be at that one with y'all, but I was away that weekend. And at the end of the mastermind, I remembered either you told me or Luciano told me, it was like, yeah, you guys are parting ways. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And I know that's a tough decision. And I got to say, by the way, props to you, because it is a hard thing when you do start having success and you are being put on a pedestal and now people are looking up to you, that you feel like there's a feeling that your decisions no longer are just your own. Like you said earlier, when it was you and your wife, a decision you made affected not just yourself, it affected her. Yeah. Now you've got this decision you're making. It's not just affecting you anymore. It's affecting partners, employees, people that look up to you inside the community, who you start to become a beacon of hope for them because they're saying, hey, I can do what he's doing. And now if you decide to walk and do something else, that's kind of shaking their foundation if they've chosen to set their foundation upon you. Yeah. So I'm curious to know, did you always have that thing inside of you that let you march to your own drum? Because that's a big thing when you're having success to what seems like everyone else, because it can be measured monetarily and people are saying, Ryan, you're killing it. But you internally are like, this isn't for me. Have you always been tapped in and plugged in to being able to say, this is for me or this isn't for me? And if it's not for me, I don't care what anyone else is saying, I'm going to walk? Or was that something that had to be developed throughout this journey over the last 12 months here?
I think it's definitely been developed. I think I've always had a little bit of it in me, like I've always wanted to not do the mainstream stuff. You know, that was part of the whole, like, let's graduate college and live in a van, just to say that we didn't do what you're supposed to do. Yeah. So I've always had a little bit of it. I definitely have a bit of like, don't tell me I'm doing well. Like, I don't want to hear it. I want, like, I disagree, right? Like, I've got my own thing. So I think it's definitely been developed. It's been more developed by being around other people that have helped to develop it, by kind of sharing the same sentiment, whether it's for themselves or for me. Like, you're never doing good enough, or surrounding yourself with people that are doing more. Right, where it's like, oh, I think I'm doing great, and then you realize, oh, other people are doing more than me, doing it better than me, whatever. So that's one aspect of it. When we talk about the wholesale, like you brought up the mastermind, I didn't know what my path out was going to be, and I didn't have a game plan at all, and I did not come to that mastermind with the plan of stopping wholesaling at all. It was not even on my radar, which will speak to the power of community and the right community. Because when we had that mastermind, I was like 2 days from not even going to the mastermind. I bought my plane ticket like right before it. I told them I wasn't going to come, and then I changed my mind, jumped on a flight out here. And basically the main part of that mastermind was we literally just did hot seats. So we sat down and we put our businesses on a board and we just ripped them apart. Yep. And it was a super blunt group of dudes. And when mine came up, I put all my stuff on the board. I put how much money I made from each of my different, businesses, how much time I spent on it, whatever. And at that point, my lending business was doing well. And it was making more money than my wholesale business, but it was only about 10% of my time, if that. Honestly, it was probably less than 10% of my time, and wholesale was like 95% of my time probably. And I put it up on the board and was like, yeah, so does this look good? And they were like, no, that's terrible. You need to stop wholesaling, you idiot. And I really didn't. Like, I did not have a plan, but because they said it to me, it was like they gave me permission.
Yeah.
So they gave me permission. They were like, yeah, no, you need to shut it down right away. And I was like, you guys sure? And they're like, yeah, it's very obvious. Turn around and look at the board. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, how do I do this? But because they give me permission, it was like, okay, well, let's do it. And that was a huge turning point. So shout out to all those dudes that were there, because that was a huge turning point.
And let me ask you this question, right? Because there's going to be people like who are listening to this right now, and they're getting advice from other individuals. This group of guys, right, at this particular mastermind, they gave you permission and you took their permission in, right? Like, you took their advice, you took their wisdom in. What did they do to vet? What did you do to vet them? Or like, why were you allowing their advice in versus other people's advice? Because I just want people who are listening to know how to discern advice, because they're going to get a lot of different advice, and not all advice is equal.
Sure. I think advice I have to look for advice that's best for me and that doesn't benefit somebody else, because that's when it feels like they're not giving you advice. They're just telling you what they want you to do. So there's two things there. The first one is that not only that weekend, but in the previous months, the people that I was with were people that had poured into me and I had poured into them. So it was a very clear, like, this isn't benefiting them. This is for my own good. That was part of it. People that I trusted, right?
Yeah.
The second part was that what they were saying was factual. There wasn't really a lot of opinion. So when I put the stuff up on the board, again, it was obvious when you look at it, but there's so many things that are obvious in life that aren't obvious if you don't open your eyes.
And open your mouth and like actually say it out loud.
So the factual part of this was I was making multiples more money lending in a 10th of the amount of time. That was the factual. So they weren't like, oh, let's think really. They were like, dude, look at the money versus time. Like, just do the other thing. It was very factual. So it was like I needed the permission, but I didn't really need a lot of convincing, because what they were saying was an opinion, really. It was like they were just a third party to help me get out of my own head.
You know what's funny? I had a similar conversation when I was in a mastermind. It was a Cardone mastermind I had done 2 years ago, and they had us do a very similar exercise. They said, okay, write down everywhere that's making you money. How much effort are you putting into each thing? How much time are you putting into each thing? And when I had laid it all out, I had realized that my flipping business was bringing in more money than my wholesale business. And my contribution to my flipping business is literally raising the capital and giving the thumbs up on the deal. And then my partner was handling everything else. I totally backed off. And they looked at me and they're like, why aren't you just doing more of that then? Like, why are you, if all your effort is going towards this wholesale and you're making a fraction of what you're making over here, why wouldn't you put more energy and effort into figuring this out? But you don't get that knowledge until you sit there and you kind of put it on a spotlight for it.
Yeah, because you're in the thing, right? So like you and I both talked about, like, I wake up every day and I do the exact same thing, which I know I get is kind of lame. And it's also interesting because I lived in a van and like totally didn't do that. So I have very different sides of me. But when you're doing the same thing every day, especially when you're putting out fires, you don't just sit there in the middle of the day with a million fires going on, trying to get everything done and survive, and just be like, let's take an hour and think a big picture about, let's draw on a whiteboard. Like, you need like pattern interrupts to find that stuff, right? So like for me, this mastermind, the mastermind you're talking about, was the pattern interrupt, where it's like, let me take a step back and actually think about this stuff and get an outside perspective. Because when you're in something, like, that's the reason why people get so far down rabbit holes of things that they shouldn't be doing, or believe people that they shouldn't be listening to, or whatever, is because when you get sucked into something, you can only see from the perspective of the people that you're with. And you have to get that outside perspective sometimes to be able to grow.
I love that. So you start getting into lending, and that's what you're doing currently. You're currently crushing it in lending. You're teaching other people how to do it now. You're putting out content on YouTube, which is high value content, by the way. Like, if people haven't checked out your YouTube channel, I highly recommend, if they're ever thinking about getting into lending, they should go and watch your YouTube channel first, because
I hate the sound of my voice, but
you know, dude, you do a good job, which is like on your YouTube channel, you actually just give out all the game. Like
Yeah.
a person could go to your channel and get basically a college degree in lending and be able to go out and start making money if they simply follow along and follow the steps. And then you even put a community together that provides support for the people. So as you made that transition into lending, you know, what's that been like? Because that's the journey you're on currently. How, like, tell me about that.
Yeah, I could talk about this in like everything I've ever done. I find it funny. So when they told me to quit wholesaling, I was like, well, I'm doing lending and I'm doing it well, and it's only taking 10% of my time. So if I quit wholesaling, which was taking up 90% of my time, and the lending only takes 10%, then, and I've said this already once, how do I fill the rest of the time? Right? What do I do? So in my head, I was like, I don't think lending requires that much. Well, it turns out that you can put in as much effort as you'd like, and the results are going to speak for themselves. And so it turns out when I put more effort into lending, what happened? Well, my lending business grew more because I had the time. I would say my lending business was almost in survival mode, and not in a bad way, but it was like I was just doing the deals I was doing, but I wasn't bringing in more deals. I wasn't doing more outreach. I wasn't improving my systems. I wasn't bringing on help, right? I wasn't doing the business stuff.
Yeah.
I was just lending. It was just, to me, it was a side thing. So when it went from a side thing to a main thing, I improved my systems. I started doing more deals. I started telling more people about deals. Got more intentional about like the YouTube and stuff like that because I had time, right? So it was just like I had time that I could fill by making things better. And so the business started to multiply as I put more time into it. And it was the very end of January when I quit wholesaling. Actually, it was probably the beginning of February when I got out. It took a little bit, obviously. So let's say like mid-February I got out. I started my school community in the end of March. So I had about a month where I like got my systems going, whatever. And then I still had, again, a ton of free time, which is, an incredible gift, obviously. Tons of free time to fill with stuff. I could have filled it with, sitting around doing nothing, watching TV. That's not me. So I was like, all right, what's my next thing? And I started seeing the stuff about school, and I was like, well, my dream, and you can go back to the mastermind. Part of the mini mastermind we did was like, what do you want to be doing in the next year?
Yeah.
And I put on the board that I wanted to start speaking at events and teaching people about what I do, because I love talking all the time. I love talking, and I'm not uncomfortable in front of crowds. Like I could speak in front of any size crowd, and I would probably feel indifferent, but it's exciting. And so that was my goal from the start. So then it was like, well, how do I do that? I have to create a platform. I have to get people to, I guess, notice me or whatever, so that I can start talking at events and doing stuff. And I have to do something noteworthy, of course.
Yeah.
And so when I saw these ads for school, I was like, well, I'll make a school. And I had no game plan at all, really. But I was like, it's an opportunity for me to create my own thing where I can teach people what I'm doing if they find that valuable. And that was basically what I was going off of. There was no like real direction, but it was just the lending's going well. I have more time. I want to learn, and improve what I'm doing. So let me just try this thing. And that was the start of that.
Yeah, I love it. And you've been crushing it since, because what I see is ultimately you're giving the thought process that you put into it, as far as what I see you do now, is you truly do come from a place of thinking, okay, what's going to be the best? Like if someone comes in, it doesn't matter if they're paying or if it's free. If somebody comes in, what's the most value that they can possibly receive for being here? And to see that level of intentionality. Not a lot of people put that intentionality behind anything that they do.
Yeah.
And you show up with that level of intentionality every single day. I mean, like the amount of study you do, the amount of work that you put into figuring out, okay, what should be inside the school? What should be on the YouTube channel? What should go on the Instagram? And you're constantly iterating and reiterating and reiterating. I'm curious to know, what does a typical day now start to look like for you from the standpoint of building your business?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was obsessed with the improvement aspect of building a community, right? So like everything I do, I'm not saying it is the best, but I always want it to be the best, right? And so when I started the school community, I didn't even know what it was. I had just seen ads. And so you can actually, the cool thing, I documented building it, and it's on my Instagram. So I documented the first 50 days of it. And if you go to the very beginning, you'll see I took videos where I was like, I'm joining school. I have no idea like what my game plan is, because I don't really know what it's supposed to be. So I just made it about like my name in school is just like finance related, because I've always loved finance. So I was like, I'll just teach people finance stuff, because I have always felt like there was, a gap in people understanding like how to buy houses, how to save money, how to not be an idiot, right?
Yeah.
And I love talking about that stuff. So I was like, I'll do that stuff. And so that was actually what I named my group after and kind of how I got started. And then for the first month, what I did was the first 2 to 3 hours of my day every day, I would just go in my office and I would just look at what other people were doing and just take notes. I did it for a month, and I still do it, but not as obsessively. For a while, it was obsessive. Like I would take notes on what they were doing. If they had multiple groups, especially if they had a free and a paid group, I would look at like, what does the funnel look like? What does their group look like? What are they doing? How are they getting people involved? How are they providing value? Just every single technical detail that you can imagine.
Such an engineer, dude.
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally. And I was also attempting to get on the phone with them if I could. So I'd reach out to people and just try and figure out how I could potentially provide value to them, so that I could convince them to get on the phone with me.
Yeah.
And so I did that with a couple of people that basically shaped what I ended up doing, because they just gave me the tea. They just gave me everything that they were doing, for free on the phone. And then I took all that and spent months, building it out or whatever. And so I think your original question that I kind of went backwards on was just, what am I doing on the business now? It's just, I'm constantly trying things to figure out what's the best possible way that I can teach people what I know. Like my fear is that I know so much now. I'm not saying I'm a genius, but I know enough, and I'm not effectively
communicating and teaching. Yeah.
Communicating.
And I've seen that, I've been in other groups. I know people who are amazing practitioners. I'm a coach by profession. Before real estate, before all this stuff, I used to coach parkour, and I had athletes who were phenomenal athletes. I mean, like guys and girls who could do things that nobody else in the world could do. And they would beg to, hey, could I come on? Could I be a part of your program? Could I coach? I want to do this with you. And I would say like, hey, it's not what you think it is, but I'll give you a shot. Like, let's see how you run a class. Let's see how you teach others. And what I found was there was a lot of practitioners who couldn't pass the information on. They knew how to do it. They were, unconsciously competent, but they weren't consciously competent. So they couldn't communicate to someone who didn't know the way on how to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
They couldn't quite put that bridge there for them. So I love the fact that like that's one of your worries, because to me, that's a sign of a good coach, someone who is intentionally aware that, hey, I might not be communicating in a way that someone else can't get it. If someone else isn't learning, it's not their fault. They're not an idiot. It's my fault. I'm not communicating it the way they need to hear it.
Yeah, I always take the blame for that stuff, because at the end of the day, like I said, I know this stuff. And so if I know how to do it, and then I tell somebody how to do it or whatever, show them how to do it, and then they don't do it, then I didn't show them well enough.
Yeah.
Right? I did something wrong, right? And so that's the business now is like basically, well, there's a lot of aspects to it, to be fair. One of the biggest things for me is just waking up every day, looking at what people are saying, doing the results that they're getting, and figuring out what can I do to make those even better, right? What can I do to improve this and continue to grow what I'm doing? Because there are certain people that are having really good success already, right? But then there's certain people that aren't. And so it's like, okay, do I need to push them harder? Do I need to give them a different avenue? Are they just not good enough, which is never the case? You can do it if you put your mind to it. So it's like, how can I reach more people more effectively to make sure that the most amount of people, the largest amount of people, are finding whatever their success is? And it's not the same for everybody either, which is the tough part. I've also never done anything like this.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything to go off of. And I think one of the biggest reasons why I've been able to do well is because if you ever talk to me, especially like when I'm hosting Zooms or whatever, like I pretty much just every day I'm like, just a reminder, guys, like I'm new to this. Like I say it all the time. Like, so.
Well, it takes the pressure off of you too to be perfect.
Yeah. Well, I'm just like, yeah, so I have a competition thing coming up that I'm doing, and we had a meeting about it yesterday, and I'm like, just a reminder, guys, like this could suck. And all I can tell you is that my heart's in the right place. Here's the reason why I'm doing it, because I think it'll help with this, this, and this. If it does really well, then we'll keep doing it or whatever. And if it sucks, like I'm warning you now, it might suck. And if it does, we'll try something else. It's okay.
I love, again, intentionality. It's one of my favorite things about you. It's like how intentional you are. Let me ask you this. As you've been going through the business yourself, I want to know what's been the most difficult thing about building your lending business and building your school community, really just being an entrepreneur from your opinion. What do you find to be the most difficult thing? And then also, I want to know, when you look at people inside your community, the people who aren't having success or who aren't producing results as of yet, what do you see as the most common reasons behind why people haven't produced results?
I think the most difficult thing for me, if I had to sum it up in one thing, is that I have now created a world for myself where it's impossible to be done working.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I'm really bad at calling it, like really bad. And so for the past couple months, like I told you, so I moved to Phoenix a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh, I'm going to hang out with people and stuff. I haven't left my house at all. Well, like, literally zero. I asked my wife. I was really excited about today because I was like, we're going to go do something. This is great. So that's the hardest thing for me, is that I've created something where it's like, I am capable of so much more. And some people be like, oh, you've done great. But it's like, oh, great. Thank you. I appreciate it. But I'm capable of so much more. And so when when you have the mind of an entrepreneur and you have that vision, it's like, am I going to go to sleep, or am I going to keep building on this thing? Because the hardest thing for me is that I know what I'm capable of and I know that I'm going to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But if let's say I have an idea to like implement a new thing, right? And it's like, if I implement this thing on Monday, it could make somebody money by Friday that helps them pay their rent this month. Or I could slack off and not do it till next week, and potentially like I could totally screw somebody over.
Damn,
right?
bro.
So it's like, I feel that responsibility.
That's heavy.
Yeah. I mean, I feel it all the time. It's like, because again, I have the keys, right? So it's like, I don't want to just keep making money for myself. I want to get this out to people. And the hardest part about it is that sometimes I'll be like driving or something, and something will come to me and I'll be like, holy crap, I got to go do that thing. And then I got to drop everything or find spare time, which it is non-existent, to go do that thing. And that happens to me all the time, where stuff pops into my head. I'm like, oh crap, I got to go do this thing. It's been happening a lot recently because after the mastermind last week, now I have too much stuff to do. And so it's like, the laundry list is a year long. So that's the hardest thing for me, is just figuring out, everyone calls it like work-life balance, which I don't think is the thing. I think it's work-life integration, but I'm not the best at integrating it still. So I'm still figuring that out. And that's a tough thing with business. The other thing I'll add is that it's tough to do business when you've never done business. So I have no idea how to hire people, really. The mastermind I was at last week, every single person that won the competition had at least 3 partners, except for me, and I had 0. Literally every single person. So, there's a room with everybody and their partners, and they're like, who are you here with? And I was like, it's just me. So figuring out how to get help, bring in help, all that kind of stuff. That's stuff that I'm like very actively working on right now. I actually have some really exciting stuff in the works on that, but very much figuring all that out.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. The fact that it's hard to turn it off when you're it's a duty to you, right? Like, it's not just
at this
a
point,
hobby. And that's really cool, because I could feel like I got like chills on my arms when you're like, man, like I can do something on Monday. I get this idea, and if I get it done by Friday, this literally saves somebody else's life. Like, and that's not an exaggeration. It is life-saving. It is life-changing to a person.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Yeah, totally is. The second one was about like why people succeed versus don't, right?
Yeah, like with the people that you've been seeing come into your community, the people that you've interacted with, and you see these people that, like, some of them just take it, they run with it, they crush, and other people, you're just like, man, like, what? After a while, you start to see patterns. What are the patterns that you start to notice for why people aren't crushing, aren't succeeding, even though they have access to all the same resources?
Yeah, it's this is gonna sound pretty cliche or simple, but I have good evidence in my own life and in my own communities to back this up. I can't give a real percentage, but let's say 80%, 90% of people just aren't doing the work, right? So they have the information, they're not implementing. And an easy example I have of that is there's a guy that reached out to me a couple weeks ago, and he was like, I've been doing all this stuff and it's not working, and I'm really frustrated because I'm doing everything and I'm not getting the results, right? And then he sent me a message the next day and he said, hey, I talked to this other guy in the group who is succeeding, because I was trying to figure out what I was doing different. And it turns out he's doing 10 to 15 times more outreach per day than I am. And it turns out what I thought was hard work just wasn't. And I'm like, cool, you just solved the problem for me.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing, is just people either aren't taking action or they don't know what real action looks like. So, they're like, oh, I'm doing 10 minutes or whatever. And it's like, no, you gotta do an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. Like, you gotta put in some serious work. And that's why everything I do, I try and caveat for people. Like, the success that you see for me, like I've worked 14, 16-hour days for the last year to 2 years doing this stuff. So don't try and replicate what I'm doing unless you're willing to put in the same amount of work. Because I'm not a genius. I'm just doing the thing.
Yeah.
So that's the big one. That smaller percentage is people who are taking action. Basically, the way I see it is most people aren't taking action. If you're taking action and you're still not seeing results, then you're either incredibly impatient and you don't understand the timeline with which it takes to be successful, or you're working on the wrong thing. So that's the new one that I'm kind of working on with people is like, okay, if you've been doing this for a couple months, you're still not seeing success, you're incredibly consistent, then you just are not good at what you're doing. You're doing something wrong. Whether your outreach is bad, I don't know, it could be anything. Your tone when you talk to people, your way that you go about it, like something is off, right? Because business, especially when you're like marketing a product, it's like, okay, the thing works, right? If the thing didn't work, it'd be like, okay, well, that's why, right? But the thing works, I'm doing it, other people are doing it. So whatever you're trying, if you're not getting the result, you are doing something
There's
wrong.
something broken inside that person's process.
Yeah.
But I like what you said too with the other one where it's a matter of volume, right? Like, having that mental reset of, well, I thought I was working. I thought I was pushing. Kind of like when we work out, right? Like when you work out with a person, it's like, wow, I thought I was working out hard. And then I went and worked out with Ryan. And I'm like, oh, crap. Like I'm barely doing anything. Like I don't have arms. I don't have a chest. Like this dude is just out here banging plates. And so I start to learn, okay, you reset my barometer of how much volume, how much work I could be doing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so with all that now, you're in this new season where you just became champion of school games. Again, congratulations. That's a huge feat. And I watched the work that you put in. You and I had a conversation on the road back when I was doing the run across America. I think this was a few months ago.
Yeah. I did not have a game plan when I called you.
No, you were like just getting into it. And then I think it was like a few weeks after that is when you decided you were going to go with school. And since then, like you said, you did the research. I mean, and I know you did the research because you and I even had a consultation phone call where I was about to get on to school and I talked to you first. And the preparedness that you came to me on that phone call with, like, all right, Marlon, I went through your Instagram, I went through your Facebook, I went through your funnels, I went through your YouTube, I saw this, I saw that. I was like, holy crap, if you did this for me for a quick conversation, I already know what you've done for yourself. You've put in the work. What do you see as the future here for Ryan for the next 12 months? Like what's on the agenda right now?
Yeah, so Alex Ramosi gave me a lot to work on. So I've got plenty of things. I think my plan has shifted pretty significantly, and I'll explain a little bit. So in my head, I was going to take my niche of lending and start to broaden it and go back more into the finance stuff, like I had said. So go from just lending to like different types of lending and other ways to make money, because I think in general business is very interesting. And I've also, a recent development is I've also added this piece where I have a very detailed and niche skill of building a community, right? So, in 2 or 3 months, I've built a community that does incredibly well. So I have the ability to now go teach that to people, potentially. But that is different than what I'm doing with the lending. It takes away from the time I'm doing with the lending. So I was considering all my options. I brought it up, and it turns out that the best advice was go harder on the thing you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's really funny when people say that. So I had actually shut down the monetary side of my community after the school games to mentally recover, I guess, and kind of just figure out what the heck was going on. And I had shut it down, and that got a laugh out of everybody at the event because nobody else had done that. And they're like, what the heck are you doing? And I opened it back up and started going harder on what I was doing, and it started doing really well again. So it's like, oh, I just stopped trying for whatever reason. I convinced
Isn't it
myself
funny
not
that we
to
do that? Because I've had that same experience where I'm like, I look back and I'm like, man, I earned a lot doing this, and then I stopped. It's like, why the hell did I stop?
And I mean, there is times, right? So like wholesale, I earned a lot of money and stopped, but there was a reason. But if there's not a good reason, then it's like, okay, you should probably keep doing what you're doing.
Just got a little tired.
And the cool thing is anytime you do anything that's scalable, it's like, okay, well, again, I'll go to the Hormozy view of this stuff. So people will say, oh, I've tapped out my market, right? And I said that, which is hilarious. So I said at the end of the school games, I said, I've tapped out the market. There was 120 people inside of my thing.
No, you tapped out your audience.
Not even, right? Not even close. And so that got a laugh out of Alex Ramosi and talking about it. He's like, dude, how many people are in the industry? What other people do stuff you do? And I brought up some of the, the other groups that do so much stuff. And it's like, 10,000 people, 20,000 people, 30,000. And I'm over here like, yeah, I think 100 is the maximum. And I'm over here like, yeah, I think 100 is the maximum. It's like, you idiot, right? So yeah, my path forward is just to lean harder into that stuff. And my primary goal right now is to do a better job of people knowing that it exists.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest things is like, okay, if you have a good product and it's not selling, then you're not doing a good enough job of letting people know that it exists. And I certainly don't do that. So my, funnels, so to speak, are dry because I don't know business. I'm still learning this stuff. But at the end of the day, the amount of people that don't know the depths with which I teach the stuff I do for free, and then on top of that, from the free stuff to the paid, more specific, more detailed, more implementation style, like the amount of people that don't know about that stuff, I realized, I'm just not filling the funnel. Like I'm not doing a good job of putting this stuff out there.
Yeah.
And even in the little bit of time that I've spent in the past couple of weeks putting it back out there, it's done incredibly well. So it turns out I just need to do that. So my goal right now is to get as many people to know as possible that it exists, and then make it something that's so freaking valuable and ridiculous that it doesn't make any sense for you not to be there. And I think that's very feasible for me to do. The biggest thing holding me back from that is that I have the business itself. So I'm very interesting in that I've created this community around my business, but my business is still my primary focus.
Yep.
And so currently I'm hiring people to help because there's always things in your business that other people can do likely better than you can for the most part. I personally don't think anybody can do the community aspect of what I'm doing right now better than I can because it's my thing. So yeah, you might be able to build a bigger, more lucrative or whatever, but I don't care about that. I'm building my thing.
Yeah.
And so I have to free up as much time as possible to be able to just have my vision become a reality for it. And so my vision right now is just creating that environment. It's creating an environment with more people knowing about it, more people joining, and then the kind of short-term plan is creating something where I elevate people from within. Because the analogy we use is the guru model versus the community model. So the guru model is like everybody listens to Marlon for what Marlon has to say. And if Marlon goes and runs across America, then they just don't get anything until Marlon decides to show back up. The community model would be like, I elevate, I'm going to be an expert in something, but I bring other people in that are experts even more than me in other things. I elevate them, and then people, by being a part of my community, not only get my value, but the value of other people inside. And it becomes, instead of like a spotlight to the top, it becomes a spider web of all these different crisscrossing paths of people. And that's where it becomes a powerful thing.
Bro, what's so crazy is last night I've been listening to a podcast with a gentleman by the name of Mark Hoverson. Mark Hoverson's passed away as of a few years ago. He passed away of cancer. Amazing online marketer. Used to live out here in Arizona. Passed away, unfortunately, very young in his late 30s, early 40s. And in this episode, gold. He was talking about this exact thing, about elevating people inside your community and looking for ways to really give them rewards, put them on platform, and allow them to become the people, the beacons that other people could come to. So I love that for your community. I love that for you. And I think it's amazing with you thinking like that. To me, that's the value of joining into a solid community. It's not that Ryan saying this is going to be the Ryan show, because at some point Ryan's going to go do something else. And people should still be able to get value from the community. Yeah. The community isn't just, if it's only one person, if it's just a guru, that's not a community, that's a cult.
Yeah.
Right. So I love what you're wanting to build here. Let me ask you this, and we're going to start to bring the show to an end. First off, for the people who are listening, right, and they want to check out your community, they want to be with you on Skool, how do they go and find that? How do they find you?
Yeah. Easiest thing is just go to my social media. You can go to my Instagram and click on the links in there, and you'll show up in there. It's on skool.com, SKOOL.com. But yeah, go to my social media, click on the links in there, and it'll take you straight there. I talk about it decently often. And I'll do a better job of putting it out there as well, but it's up there.
And guys, I'm going to have this inside the description below in the show notes. So check out Ryan. If anyone's been watching me on Instagram, you'll see the people I follow has been going down drastically. I'm actively trying to put it under 200 people, under 100 if possible. You're one of the people I still follow. Your account is one of those accounts where I was like, I'm getting value from him still, and I am refusing to unfollow him. And I'm unfollowing friends, I'm unfollowing gurus, I'm unfollowing a lot of people. Your page, I can't bring myself to click unfollow because I'm still getting value.
Appreciate
so
it.
guys,
I'll keep an eye out on you and make sure you don't unfollow me later.
Oh yeah, 100%. Do it. So I want to ask you these 2 questions. I love to ask everyone at the end of every show. The first one is, I love reading. Reading has changed my life. Books ultimately introduced me to a new world where everyone in my circle at one point was thinking W-2, was thinking, limiting mindsets. And books broke me out of that. I got to tap into the mind of Tony Robbins and Robert G. Allen and Robert Kiyosaki, people like that. Name 1 to 2 books, no more than 2, no less than 1, that have created paradigm shifts in your mind that after you read these books, you have never been the same ever since.
Yeah, I'll give a lame one and then a good one. So the first one is Rich Dad Poor Dad. I call it lame, but I mean it was a paradigm shift for me. It was stuff that I didn't know. It's more. I think it's exactly what you said, paradigm shift. So it's less stuff I didn't know and more just like concepts and approaches that I didn't realize were a reality. Just a different way of thinking, and that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
On there, it's stuff like assets versus liabilities, whatever. But it's concepts that just are not taught. And when they're not taught, you either need it to be introduced to you somehow, or you got to, I guess, experience it for yourself or figure it out on your own. And so that was the first big one. The huge one in my life right now, it sits on my desk at all times. I use it constantly, is $100 Million Leads by Alex Hormozi. The reason why it's so big for me is because I do not come from a business background. I am now heavily in the business realm. And that book is like a children's book about business and about lead generation, which is all I do now, is lead generation. And so being able to read it from somebody that I respected, that created it in a way where there's literally like drawings and pictures throughout the whole thing, and it's like a textbook, it's a huge book, is so impactful to me, because when I was like, I've read it multiple times now, and when I'm reading it, it's like, for some people that are in business, it might be like all this stuff is kind of lower end, like, oh, some of this stuff I already know. But I don't know any of this stuff. I don't know anything about lead generation. I mean, I do now, but I'm slowly learning business. And so paradigm shift there is like, oh, this stuff exists and it's predictable. That's the really cool thing about lead generation, is like, I learn something and then I go try it and it works, and I go back and it's like, if you do this, it will work. And it's like, oh, it's that simple. You just have to do this and it works. And it turns out, yes, oftentimes it really is that simple. So that's been a big one.
I love that. Final question. I want to imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up, and as you're coming to consciousness and you're beginning to open your eyes, you are a blank slate. You don't remember anything. You don't remember the last year and a half. You don't remember the W-2. You don't remember wholesaling. You don't remember lending. You don't remember the school games. None of the books you've read, the experiences you've had. I mean, like, totally blank. You're not freaking out. It's not a Saw movie, so you're not like waking up scared for your life or anything like that. As you come to, you start to have a thought. This first thought that comes into your mind, it lands in there, it sticks, and nobody will ever be able to convince you that this thought you're having is not true. So you just accept it with 100% faith. What would you ideally prefer this first thought to be?
It's probably one of the most interesting questions I've ever been asked. I think I have an answer though, and it's a recent one. So, you may have to ask me later, because I feel like I change my mind about this stuff all the time. But I think it's that business is the most efficient way to take back control of your life. And what I mean by that is, I tell people, like, I think I've tried close to maybe the most possible ways to make money, like online or out, let's say, I don't know how you would describe it, but outside of a W-2, right? So stock trading, day trading, cryptocurrency, real estate, all that stuff. But a lot of it is unpredictable. And like I just mentioned, business is incredibly difficult, but it's very predictable. And the more I've learned about it this year, the more I've realized that business is what I want to do. And it could be as dumb as like a toy business or as big as like a big corporation business, because it's all the same fundamentals. And that is something that I want to do for the rest of my life in some capacity, is just continue to learn and grow businesses. I think the reason why people can't convince me otherwise is because people always try and say my thing is best, my thing is the quickest, whatever. And what you see there's a quote that I'm probably going to miss, but I think real estate makes the most millionaires, and it's either private equity or business makes the most billionaires. Right?
Yep.
So it's like, what I like to do is look at, okay, don't look at the people that are like slightly ahead of you necessarily, but think of the people that are like where you want to be and what are they doing? And for me, it's usually always the same answer to what they're doing. If they're living the life I want to live, and it's business. And so some of it is like, hey, let me just skip the line and just start doing this thing, or at least start working towards it, right? I'm like not a business mogul by any means, but I'm starting to do business. I'm learning funnels and marketing and creating offers and sales and all this stuff. And I don't want to stop. So I don't think I can be convinced otherwise that is the best path to creating freedom, because it's the only thing that I think is infinitely scalable and you can pull yourself out of that doesn't actually require you to be there.
Dude, that is a solid answer. And I got to say this about you, man. Like, and for people who are only listening to the audio, like, I feel bad. In your eyes, bro, you have so much like intention and focus, which is so fascinating to me. Like, when I look at a person in their eyes, like, the eyes tell a lot. And as you've been having this conversation for the last hour, there's just been so much clarity, focus, and intentionality with every word you spoke. So I'm excited to see your journey over the next 12 months and really over the next lifetime. So, guys, if you enjoyed this show, I want you to go and give Ryan a follow on social media. Go hit him up on Instagram and go jump into the Skool channel. I mean, this is someone that I'm actively keeping inside of my inner circle. Make sure that you get around him while you still can, while he's pouring an ungodly amount of time in the Skool platform. Because at some point, I imagine you're going to be moving on to other things and you won't be able to give in the exact same way you're giving now. So for people to get access to you, they should go into the Skool platform, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's my main intention right now.
I love it.
I would say more than making money. Like I think I can say that I would factually make more money if I didn't do school and just put 100% of my time and effort into the lending. The reason why I chose to do this was because I wrote on that whiteboard that my goal was to get in front of more people, teach more people, and speak on stages. And creating a platform I felt like was the way to do that. And so I spend more time than I probably should doing that right now.
So I love that. Sure. So guys, connect with Ryan. Notes are going to be down in the description below. Ryan, dude, thank you for coming on, bro.
Thanks for having me.